grief is just love with nowhere to go, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And so now when something like that comes up, even if it brings tears to my eyes, it feels good because it reminds me of what we had. It reminds me of that life.
Hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of Behind Beliefs and Behaviors. Y'all know who I am. I'm Dr. Maisha. And today we're talking about a topic that we have not talked about before with a new friend of mine who's also a colleague, Dr. Serign, also on social media known as Dr. Serendipity. Dr. Serign is a family physician, much like myself. And we're really going to be talking about this grief journey and how it looks different in different people. So I just want to welcome you, Dr. Serign. Thank you
Thank
so much for being here. I really appreciate it. I have to say, I have been following Dr. Serendipity for some time now. Like, I'm sure it's been over a year that I've been following. And what drew me to your platform is the way you have talked about your own journey with grief. And I
you.
know it's interlaced with a lot of other really good topics and contents, but when that would come up, it really touched me because we all go on our grief journeys, and it's not something that is amplified, and particularly in communities of color as well. So it was just refreshing to see someone with who looked like me, mine, that is talking about this, and also from a male perspective as well.
Mhm.
So thank you for the platform that you have, and yeah, let's get the
Yeah,
conversation
yeah,
going.
absolutely. Yeah, thanks for having me on. I appreciate you reaching out. And as you're saying, what kind of drew you to that was, and that's the reason why I do it. And bottom line for my grief is just like, and we'll get to the details of stuff, I'm sure, here in a minute. I really benefited from hearing other people's stories when I was struggling. And so it personally helps me to just share and talk about it. But I
Mhm.
also feel like that was just part of my responsibility in going forward in my journey is to share the experience so somebody else can learn from the trials and tribulations that I've already had. So,
Yeah, yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I mean, I like for my audience to get to know the guest as we go into the conversation. So, would you mind just formally sharing who you are, what you
yeah,
do?
sure. Yeah. So, yeah, as you said on social media, I'm Dr. Serendipity. It is a play off my name. My name is Serign. And even when I was a kid, it was like hard for people to pronounce and with the spelling. And so even as a kid, I would tell people it's like serendipity. And so that's why I chose
Um,
that.
nice.
But plus also just because like through my grief journey, I've ended up in Arizona and with a new family and things that I didn't expect. And so the very definition of something that is serendipity or serendipitous, finding something without looking for it. So
That's right.
but yeah, I from state of Washington, grew up small town, Pullman, Washington, where Washington State University is at. Whole family worked for the university. Went to school there, got to play football for the Cougs. So anybody watching this, that's a go Cougs. So that was like a lifetime ago, but I was a linebacker in college. And then after college, obviously went on to medical school with the University of Washington, which is
Mhm.
actually technically my rival at the time. Some people still give me grief for that, but I'm a big time Coug. So but anyways, did medical school in Seattle there and residency nearby as well. Through that whole deal, my first wife, my late wife, was with me. We had met at the end of college. We were both done with school and working for the university.
Mhm.
And so she was with me through med school and residency. And it
Mhm.
was right before residency is when we had our first kid. So we had two boys together.
Mhm.
And some family medicine doctor. I was initially going to go on to do sports medicine. That was always the plan. And
Mhm.
that's one of the things that drastically changed after she passed away. And, a lot of my career was completely put on hold.
Mhm.
And I'm still thinking about what I might do in the future. But like right now, I'm in a really good spot. So I don't really feel the need to do anything different.
Mhm.
But so family medicine doc. And then again, we'll get, I'm sure, to the details of the grief part of it. But after my wife had passed away and life moved on as it does, met somebody new. So I am remarried. We've got a big blended family. My wife, Michelle, she had two. I had two, and then we got
Mhm.
crazy and said, let's have one together. We've got these older kids who are like, one's in middle school and the other three are in high school, and then we have a 4-year-old. So we totally started over.
Fun.
Yeah. Which now I look at that and sometimes I'm like doing the math. I'm like, wait, how old am I going to be when this kid graduates from high school? So but and then through this whole journey, it was in Washington. We lived temporarily in San Diego, where my late wife had a bunch of family, and then
Mhm.
I'm out in Tucson, Arizona. And I'm in a private practice out here, which is really nice and a really good practice. And yeah, so currently with a practice and 5 kiddos.
Nice, nice, yeah, and I think I shared with you Tucson is my birthplace.
Oh
So,
yeah, yeah, great.
yeah,
What
haven't been
hospital were
back
you
in a
born at?
while,
Do
but
you know what
yeah.
hospital you were born at?
Pima County Hospital.
Okay, so Pima County, and that's probably what's now been things get taken over. It's corporate now. It's
Yes,
Banner University is what it's called now, I think. So
yes, yeah,
yeah.
look, Pima County was 1975, so,
So a couple years
long
ago.
time ago.
Yeah, yeah. Funny.
Yeah, well, we can start anywhere in this conversation. It's gonna be a good conversation.
Yeah.
I think that one of the things that struck me, and oh, by the way, Dr. Serign is an author. I was reading this first book, Men Just Be Married. Widowhood is for Women, Men Just Be Married, and
Mhm,
Other Wild Misconceptions of the Widower Experience.
mhm,
And one of the things that really struck me was how different people's grief experiences are.
mhm,
And so you talk a little bit about that the first year and the things that happened, and like you said, how you serendipitously met someone. And so I'd love for you to share, what lessons did you take away? What was that like for you? What lessons, and how do you, I know that you've probably seen other, or walked other people, or been with other people through their grief. How does
mhm,
that contrast? What are you taking away from that? What have
mhm.
you taken away from that?
Well, one of the things I say and I tell people, and I share with patients all the time. I mean,
Mhm,
anytime it comes up, I'm always giving my story and just
mhm,
sharing my personal experience on stuff.
mhm,
And one thing I always say is to not compare grief just
mhm.
because, and not compare like what happened,
Right.
because on the outside, we all look at, I mean, yes, there's studies on it. Yes, there's like the top things, right? And so, of course, like the death of a child is absolutely devastating. And of course, that's more devastating than the death of like your third cousin or something that you don't know, right? We
Mhm,
all get
mhm,
that. But
mhm,
when you're sitting down with somebody and you're talking about it and they are struggling, it doesn't matter what like level it was because they're still getting like some of the same feelings. Like their body is still reacting a certain way. So I always
mhm,
just throw that out there. Let's not compare like, oh, you have it worse or I have it better or I shouldn't feel this way, that kind of thing. And then also just in terms of like how you go about it, everybody's going to be a little bit different. Some people might dive into work. Some people might dive into their kids and everything is perfect with their kids, and then but the rest of them is crumbling or something. Or
mhm,
maybe they just dive into work and the whole rest of their personal life is falling apart.
mhm,
Or maybe vice versa. Maybe they're able to keep the family stuff together and then it's the work that falls apart. So it's just everybody's going to have a different experience. And I don't think that we can, at least in my experience, like that it can be controlled. It's just going to be what it is, and you have to adjust to that. And I guess too, just to give like a little bit of background as we're talking about grief, like
mhm,
everybody wants to know what happened, and that's another thing too. Is that another thing not to compare is even if you have spouses, like you're talking to a person, they lost their spouse.
mhm,
I also think it's important that it doesn't matter how you lost them. You know what I
mhm,
mean? Because then there's other things involved. And so for me, it was traumatic and sudden. My wife,
mhm,
Visa is her name, just like the credit card Visa, which is short for a long Laotian name, but she always just went by
mhm,
Visa. She's perfectly healthy, 35 years old. Our
mhm,
kids were not quite 2 and 4 years old. They're like youngest
mhm,
was like 22 months old.
mhm,
And I was at work seeing patients. We had this. She had texted me asking me if I wanted like a coffee. She's gonna be by my clinic. I'm like, nah, I already got a coffee. I'm good, thanks, babe. And then like literally 13 minutes later, she calls me. Now I'm in an exam room. Like my phone is buzzing in my pocket. I'm not gonna take my phone out and answer it. I'll get back to it. And so the phone is ringing, and then I get back to my office after seeing this patient. I'm like, oh, she called. She left a message. Let me check the message. It's about 20 minutes after that she had left it. And it was this long message just saying that she didn't feel good, that her chest kind of hurt. She's having some trouble breathing and stuff.
mhm,
But her concern in the end was just about the kids. She's just, I just don't know if I'm gonna be able to take care of the kids this afternoon. And I was just like, I heard it. And I mean, my first thought was just like, maybe I'll just take the afternoon off, just cancel my schedule, just go home.
mhm,
So I called her, and first call, she didn't answer. And I was just like, maybe she's changing a diaper. Wait a little bit, called a second time, and she didn't answer. And my older one had like learned how to like swipe on an iPhone and cancel calls
mhm,
and stuff when he was like playing on games, like a
mhm,
3 year old.
mhm.
I was like, dang.
Yeah.
But I just like, maybe he's just playing on the phone. And
Mhm,
so wait a little bit, and I called the third time. And that's when I just got this like feeling like,
mhm,
internally something's wrong,
Mhm.
called my neighbor who he worked from home, and I was just like,
Mhm.
hey, you go check on her. And he calls me back in a few minutes, and he's like, Sarah, she's awake, but we just called 911. You need to come home now. That's just
Mhm.
world crashing, running out of clinic. And I mean, I could go. There's part of the day that like I can give you minute by minute, and then there's
Mhm.
chunks of I don't even know what happened. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
And I was actually able to get home. I rushed home. I got there when the paramedics were there, and she was pale, and they were loading her up, and I'm just like, nothing for me to do. I was just like, I love you. I'll see you at the hospital, right?
Mhm.
That was the last moment that we had any sort of interaction, which I don't. I mean, I think she heard me, but she was pretty disoriented. So she ended up passing away from blood clots in her lungs. And in the end, they just said that it was probably due to all things her birth control pills,
Mhm.
which I've always just found ironic that like we're trying to prevent maybe another life, and that's what took her. We did find out later that there was a lot more stuff in her family history that she wasn't really aware about. And
Mhm.
that's another thing I use with people all the time is like family history is really important for a
Mhm.
lot of us. Like our generation, older people didn't share that kind of stuff. No, it's none of your business, and it's very much your business because
Right.
as as like a doctor, it's going to change maybe how you treat somebody and tests that you order and all that kind of
Mhm.
stuff. So that day she coded before she even got to the hospital, and then it was just like back and forth all day long, the ICU and all this kind of stuff before they finally called it. So that day started out as just a normal, you know, every other kind of day. Like I remember
Mhm.
she was a budgeter, like big time budgeter, like she did for work, and that's what she did for our family too. And but she's the type of person that she like literally told me, she's like, hey, guess what? In 16 months, like not 12, like not 18, like 16. She's like, in
Mhm.
16 months, we're gonna have X amount of your loans paid off and this paid off, and then and I'm gonna have this amount saved for vacation. So what do you want to do? I'm like, I
Mhm.
can't think that far ahead right now. So I was like, why don't you just plan the vacation? And so it was she had talked about some of that stuff that morning. We were talking about getting a new car, and we talked about the
Mhm.
coffee, and then to come home that day, that was probably like had lots of lonely times for sure, but like
Mhm.
coming home that night with just the two boys, like to
Mhm.
the empty house, was just like unbelievably just cold and empty. It's like
Mhm.
what just happened to my life. It's just a whirlwind of stuff afterwards when you're doing all like the funeral kind of things, and you're just like, at least for me, I was crying in silence, probably, or in solitude or whatever, and
Mhm.
just trying to do things normal. Boys got to go to preschool or this or that, going to work. But
Right.
um, we got through like the funeral and different things that we did. And it was, I guess, just not cruising, but I was just on automatic pilot for like a little.
Mhm. Mhm.
And it wasn't even until later that I really started to crash and things got really
Mhm.
bad. And it was like that for me for a while, a lot of ups and downs. That's what happened. And then that's where the grief journey starts. So,
It's interesting you said that's where the grief journey starts. Like, there was the up and down, you were on autopilot, and then before you really crashed, and that's where the grief journey starts.
yeah.
Not at that moment where your late wife passed.
Right. Because I didn't even just, there's nothing to even, you couldn't think. I couldn't think. It was just sort of like, I don't even know. I'm sad, angry, all these
Mhm.
different things. And it was just took a little while to, even though I felt the loss and the devastation, it took a while to really be like my life is completely different. I don't know. So much was just feeling so lost on what
Mhm.
to do next.
Yeah. Why I think that's interesting is because I think a lot of people, when we talk about like grief and loss, to expand it out, like, loss can look like many things. Like, you lost your late wife, and I've lost family members as well, and, like, I lost my sister a couple of years ago, and then there's, like, divorce. I know people who have lost their spouse after, or divorced their spouse after decades of marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's loss of jobs, loss of license for, I know physicians who have had their license taken away. Then there's even, there's these different levels of grief. And what I think is interesting about what you said is that in that those initial period, whatever that period is for the person, there's just this sort of like the mind is just somewhere else. There's just an autopilot. There's not a real, it's not like it's not an understanding, but it's just this sort of like survival mode for a while.
Oh yeah.
And then something happens and the grief journey begins. I would love to know, was there something specific for you that happened, or was it, did you just wake up one day? Like, what happened that sort of flipped the switch or slid the dial
Mhm.
towards, okay, now the grief journey is beginning? What
Yeah.
was that for you?
I mean, if we put it that way, I could almost say that I was delaying the start of the journey in a way, because
Mhm.
really all I was doing was anything I could to avoid the pain. Even in those first few months, I went off and traveled some weekends and did stuff with new people. And then that was something I found out right away, where I liked being around people that I
Mhm.
hadn't been around before who
Mhm.
didn't know her, because
Mhm.
it was too hard to be with the people who did, because
Mhm.
they're grieving too differently, obviously not exactly the same, but
Mhm.
then you're just sitting and you're all talking about it. And if I was with other people who didn't really know her, then
Mhm.
they weren't really talking about it. But I usually inevitably did. I mean, I can't tell you how many drunken stupor telling random strangers things and stuff
Mhm.
like that. And even at a football game one time, I was talking to this one guy who knew her, and it was like, I mean, like this huge touchdown happened, and I jumped up, yelling, screaming, like excited, and then literally crying in
Mhm.
the stands, like
Mhm.
not just like a tear, like sobbing,
Mhm.
because that was a big part. Like I said, I played football, and that was
Yeah.
a big part of what we did and friends that we
Mhm.
had and stuff, after
Mhm.
graduation. So for a long time, just avoiding it. And it's like, it's, I mean, I don't always talking about it, but it's just like, it just, I got to be honest. I'm not necessarily ashamed. It's just what it was. But I mean, it was alcohol, drugs, women,
Mhm.
dating new people, like
Mhm. Mhm.
whatever it was to avoid. And inevitably that turned to an even worse crash, because I hadn't dealt with anything yet. And I was just
Mhm.
kind of
Mhm.
letting it go.
Yeah.
We stayed in Washington for a year. So she passed away. It's been, 10 and a half years now. It was March of 2014.
Mm.
And I wasn't in work at work for a while, and then I tried going back to work. And I mean, I kid you not, just the way things work out. One of the first patients I saw going back to work, when I was going through her history, talked about having a blood clot due to her birth control pills. And
Mm.
he was just like, she goes, but it wasn't a big deal. They treated me. It's no big deal. And I was
Mm.
like I lost it. I don't know if I even stayed the rest of that day, because it was like,
Mm.
that's exactly what she passed away from. And that was like, she passed away in March. That was probably like September or something. And that led to another crash and me seeking like professional help. And then like January of 2015 came around, and I did something at the time, which like you could definitely say was like not necessarily like a smart decision, but it was just all I could do at the time. Is I was done being a doctor. I was just like, F this, F that. I can't take care of my boys. I can't take care of myself, let alone try and take care of other people or even care. And so I quit my job. I let my license expire. I was just like, maybe I'll just never be a doctor again. I don't know.
Mhm.
And I remember we just hung out for the next 6 months. I let my son finish up this pre-K class that he was in, that my wife had really wanted him to be in. And then
Mhm.
we moved to California
Mhm.
to be around her family and
Mhm.
some sister-in-laws of mine that we were really close to. Because I
Mhm.
was like, I want them to know her family. Like she had a very large Laotian family. She was the youngest of eight. Like our
Mhm.
kids were like the 21st and 22nd grandkids in the family or something like that.
Yeah.
So that was super important for her. So I was like,
Mhm.
well, let's be around them. And that all sounds good on paper, but what happened was that now you got all this family that wants to help. And it took a lot of the responsibility away from me. And
Mhm.
had I been in a healthy place, then that probably would have been like, okay, go and focus on yourself now and do good things, right? But I
Mhm.
wasn't in a healthy place yet. So it just allowed me to get even worse. Nobody's fault. It just allowed me to get worse. And so, so it's just a lot of avoidance for
Yeah.
me, and really getting to the point where I wasn't living, was barely surviving. It was more like I was just existing. I was breathing and getting up and walking and talking, but like a zombie a lot of the
Mhm.
times, whether that was being a zombie because of just emotional, mental, whatever, or
Mhm.
if it was because of being intoxicated or whatever else it was, right?
Mhm.
And finally, and then through this whole process, I met someone new,
Mhm.
Michelle, who I'm now married to. That was definitely tumultuous at times, because You mentioned other forms of grief, and divorce is definitely grief. Is
Mhm.
it losing the person you love? No, but it is losing a life that you had planned.
That's right.
And
That's right.
that's the big thing. Like, people aren't upset about that person, they're upset about the life that they had envisioned and
That's
it's
right.
now gone, right?
Mhm.
And I can share this. My wife was just getting out of, or just starting actually, like a bad divorce.
Mhm.
And so we got two people in pain, which, kind of
Mhm.
makes you bond, and it's not
Yep.
always the best way, right?
Right.
But it was also, I think, an escape for both of us as
Mhm.
well, and
Mhm.
an avoidance of pain. And then it was hard because now you've got two people and families blending and stuff, and then it's, wait, there's something real here. But I still was like not really like ready for that stuff, and so
Mhm.
I was still struggling, and it was early on. I had like suicidal thoughts. I didn't necessarily have those anymore, but I also just didn't really feel like living either.
Mhm.
And so finally, it was, so now we're more than 2 years into the process, where it was like now my kids were being basically taken from me. Like, my sister-in-law needed to have them because I really couldn't take care of them. And then I was going to lose this new relationship because she was like, if this is not going to work, if this is the way that you're going to be. And so it brought me down even lower. Now I've got more loss,
Mhm.
like on
Mhm.
top of the other stuff I haven't even addressed yet.
Mhm.
So finally, really sought out even more intense professional help. I did grief therapy individually. I did grief therapy in groups. And that's
Mhm.
where I really found a lot of value in it, because, and this is what I say all the time, I've said it on a bunch of videos, is intellectually, we all know that if people lose people every day. It happens all the
Mhm.
time, right?
Mhm.
Everybody understands that. But until I sat with people who could tell me where they were, where they've gone, what they've done, all that kind of stuff,
Mhm.
nothing ever clicked. But now I was sitting with somebody who, like, otherwise you'd think you'd have nothing in common with, but now it's like, oh
Mhm.
my God, we have a huge bond. And that really started to turn the corner for me. And another big thing is somebody asked me at one point, was like about like legacy, in a
Mhm.
sense, in
Yeah.
in with my kids, because a lot of people are like, well, just do it for your kids.
Mhm.
If it were that easy, I never would have struggled, right?
Right.
But
Right.
like, it would have been nice if I just had this switch where I'm just like, nope, I'm super dad hero, I'm fine. But I
Right.
couldn't do that in the beginning. But
Right.
I eventually got to a place where I was ready to like really hear that and absorb that kind of stuff. And so I started thinking about legacy, and it was like, okay, my kids have had a pretty bad start to life, like losing their mom. They're
Mhm.
young enough that like they're
Mhm.
never really gonna fully know her, like
Mhm.
they hear from me about her.
Mhm.
And so I was just like, so the worst case scenario would be they grow up and they say, yeah, our mom died when we were little, we don't know her. And then our dad fell apart and died, or he's not around, or something like
Mhm.
that. They could say that.
Mhm.
Or they could say, our dad really struggled and had a really rough time for a while, and then
Mhm.
he figured it out, and then we got him back. That was just like, I mean, you could say that should have been obvious from the get-go, but I
Mhm.
needed to be in a different state of mind, mentally, emotionally,
Yeah.
spiritually. That was just a big turning point. That was like fall of 2016.
Yeah.
uh, and so going forward from there, things just changed a lot. And that's when I really started like incorporating grief into my life in a positive way, like no longer avoiding it, now specifically like addressing it, like how do I want to change this and do this and whatever. And so then it was like spring of 2017, I was just like, you know what? I haven't worked for a couple of years now. I was just like, I spent a long time trying to become a doctor and a lot of money. You
Yeah.
know?
Yeah.
I think I've got something of value I can give to people now. I've been out long enough. I had to reactivate my license. I had to retest and
Mhm.
that kind of stuff. So I had some stuff to prove, and it was okay because I was wanting to do it. Then I was ready. And it's one of those things where I was getting better, and Michelle and I had broken up for a while through that whole thing. And then when it was like I was better and we started talking again, it was just like, do we want to revisit this like
Mhm.
relationship?
Mhm.
And that's when I decided to move to Arizona. And then after that, it was like we got married, we built a house, we had a baby, and everything
Yeah.
happened really fast and stuff. But I was in a better place, and because early on too. So probably the reason that you follow me and the reason for the books was a video I put out a couple years ago, and that video went viral, and that's what got me a lot of the followers and
Mhm.
whatnot. And people used to comment all the time when they see videos about her and the kids, oh, we're so glad you found happiness again, as if I found it because I'm with her.
Right, 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 right.
The big distinction I make with everybody is no, I found happiness within,
Mhm.
which makes me available, allows me to be in a relationship because I
Yeah.
did that, not the other way around.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, and I think One of the first videos that I may have come across of yours was of you with your children with your late wife's family.
Hmm.
And I think that was for me, that was a big touching moment. I'm so glad that
Hmm.
you were in a place where you could be with the family
Yeah.
and that's and be healed inside of that.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Well, and for a while, we did not have a good relationship because
Mhm.
as I was struggling, I used to be mad at them. But of course, over time, I've realized that like a lot of stuff that they were doing, it was just a reaction to my
Mhm.
behavior. I couldn't see it at the time, and I was all mad at them and everything. But
Mhm.
over time, I just realized like they were hurt, they were scared, they were
Mhm.
worried about the boys. And so we've all had some healing to do with that. And what's nice is that for a while to where like we weren't on speaking terms, and
Mhm.
now it's I just the boys are out there now with them and they
Mhm.
still get that interaction, not with all of them because she's got a lot of family that are all over the place, but the
Yeah.
ones we're closest to in San Diego they get to see on a pretty regular basis, so that's really nice.
Yeah, I mean, you drop like so many like gems, even just in the story that you shared. One of the things, like just a few of the things that stood out, like number one is the grief can pop out at any given time, unexpectedly.
Yeah.
When you were sharing about being at the football game, and I'm sure there are like countless other moments
Oh yeah.
where it just unexpectedly hits you. And I think that's part of the journey. But then also avoidance is part of the journey.
Yeah.
And I think that people who maybe grieve and don't avoid, but they like lean into their grief, don't get that part. That avoidance is actually part of the journey.
Oh, for sure, and this is a natural reaction, it's a painful thing. Who wants that, right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
much avoidance at first, but then and now, I mean, I can only say this from all the work I've done and time as well. Now those moments, I welcome them.
Hmm.
In fact, I actually enjoy sounds like a weird word
Yeah.
to use, but when that comes up, it just because I'm sure you've heard the saying or the quote or whatever. It's just like grief is just love with nowhere to go, right?
Hmm. Hmm.
And so now when something like that comes up, even if it brings tears to my eyes, it feels good because it reminds me of what we had. It reminds me of that life. And that's a portion of my life that is gone,
Hmm.
but it still happened. So now it comes up. I like it. It's funny. Like what's the movie with Kevin Hart where he's the father and his wife passes away? He's got,
I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember the name of the movie, but I know exactly
yeah,
the movie. Okay, our audience is gonna go look it up. That's your
yeah,
homework.
yes, right. So now I knew in the movie that his wife passed away,
Yeah.
right? And we all want to watch this movie, and we thought this would be
Mhm.
a good like family movie to watch,
Right,
right?
right.
And the beginning of the movie, right away, he loses her, and he loses her to blood clots in her lungs, and that part hit, and I was like, oh, I didn't know that. And we're sitting on the couch, and I can just feel all the kids. They're looking over at me, even my
Mhm,
stepkids. They're like,
mhm,
"Oh, they understood the significance of this." And
mhm.
then it's the beginning of the movie, and we're all like tearing up, a lot more
Yeah.
me. But that was much farther into my journey. So even though it was sad, it still felt good in here to be reminded of that life. And
Yeah.
so yeah, now I don't avoid any of that. Obviously, I talk pretty openly about this stuff, and I'm very cognizant of certain dates and things like that. Always celebrating her birthday, and
Mhm.
at the beginning, I didn't talk too much about the day that she died because I didn't want my boys to like at a young age think that they had to be sad on that day for them to have their own reaction.
Right.
But now they know the day is coming, and we talk about it, and
Mhm.
we usually go do something. So like now it's again it's acceptance. It's incorporating the grief into my life.
Yeah, yeah. I had a friend recently say that we grieve deeply because we love deeply.
Yeah.
And so and in fact, I was interviewing her on a podcast earlier this week, and we were when as that quote came up in the context of something completely different, and it actually like it choked me up. I'm like, I'm reminded of that, like for all that I have, for all the grief that I've had, for the life that I thought I would have, for the
Mhm.
people I've lost, for the way the world is going, quite frankly, for all of that grief, I can be settled in that I grieve deeply
Mhm.
as I feel deeply because I love so deeply.
Right. Absolutely.
Yeah, yeah. So I appreciate you sharing your story. I do. I shared with you in the back room that if I might decide or invite you to a second conversation because
Mhm.
this is it's a great topic, and I feel like we've just scratched the surface
Yeah.
of this
Yeah, that's what
conversation.
I wanted to talk about, yeah.
Yeah, so I mean, I'd be honored if sometime in the future you came back on because I feel like one of the things that doesn't get talked about, like there's the journey and then there's the advice we give to other people about and how other people respond to our journey, people who don't
Mhm.
know what to say and how to react and how to respond. And I think that's just as important of a conversation to have
Mhm.
as any, because I used to be one of those people that didn't know what to say. But I was also one of those people that avoided. I'll share very quickly. In childhood, I had three high school classmates that I was close to died of plane crash,
Mm.
and we had to sing at their funerals because I was in the choir.
Mhm.
So we had to sing at their funeral,
Yeah.
all three of them. And then there was a little girl that passed away shortly after that, and we
Mhm.
had to sing at their funeral. And I decided at that moment that I would never go to another funeral again. So now fast forward, my half brother passes away at 16. And I think that when I look back on it, I think it was unconscious, but I was in another country and I didn't make it back for the funeral.
Mhm.
And I had several like close friends and family members pass away that I have avoided the funeral. Med school, I'm in exams. College, I'm in exam. Like conveniently,
Yeah.
right? And it wasn't until was it 2008? I guess it was 2020. I don't know, 2008ish, I think, when a classmate of mine died. So I some years later, my brother passed away, and he was 16 at the time, and I happened to be in another country. And unconsciously, I think that over the years, I avoided going to funerals. Like I didn't make it back for his funeral, and there were like multiple family members and family friend members and people who
Mhm.
passed away over time. And whether it was a college exam or a med school exam, or I happened to be out of town or out of the country or whatever, that I wasn't able to make it back. But I avoided funerals
Mhm.
until 8 when I had a classmate pass away, and something told me it was time for me to go back.
Mhm.
And I'll tell you, I grieved for all of the people I in that moment.
Mhm.
And for me, like you said, the grieving journey, like for me, that was a part of where the healing journey began around my relationship to loss, to death and loss.
Mhm.
And so I just appreciate you sharing your story because it really is, we have to normalize
Mhm.
the grief process in all of its forms. And for us to be able to, I think as much as mental health, grief gets stigmatized. There's a way it's supposed to go.
Right. Yeah, here's your stages, and you should be at this point now, and
Right.
blah, blah, blah. Yeah.
Right. And I still struggle. There's certain things like I had 4 losses in the last 2 months happen in
Mhm.
my community. And so I still have to struggle with that. No, I'm not supposed to be anywhere. I'm not
Right.
supposed to have to feel anything. When
Yeah.
it comes, and I can allow it to come. You know what I'm
Right.
saying?
Allow it to come, embrace it.
Yeah, embrace it
Yeah.
and know that it's because I loved deeply.
Right.
Yeah.
I'll share that. I know you got to get going, but I'll share this one more quick story.
Sure.
This was just this March, so just
Mhm.
7 months ago, whatever.
Mhm.
And so a song that came on, so we for our wedding, it was John Legend, "Stay With You." That was what we had as
Mm,
our wedding
mhm,
song.
mhm.
And so always just been a fan. And then it was after she passed away when I heard the song "All of Me" by John Legend.
Mm, mhm,
And I mean, I listened to that thing like a million times because it just
mhm.
made me think of her. And now I got so many people around me that'll be like, "Oh, we heard that song," or my boys, they hear it and they like look
Yeah.
at it. And so it was painful at first.
Mm,
Now it's good, right? But
yeah.
on the anniversary this year,
Mhm.
and I'm sitting in my office and thinking about things, and sometimes like the staff out at the desk, they've got like some music playing or whatever in the
Mhm.
clinic, and that song came on. And
Mm,
I came out of my office and I was like, "Who put this song on?" And
mm,
they're like, "What do you mean? It's just on the whatever radio playing." And I was just like,
mhm,
"Oh my God." And I knew I was like, "Well, I got to share right now. There's some new staff, some people that know
mhm,
my story." And I was just like,
mhm.
"Well, this is why." And I was like, it was a great moment to have that on. And it was like,
Yeah.
tears for everybody, but
Mm,
that's the example of this is now further along in the grief journey and
mhm.
recognizing whatever positives there might be and embracing it and remembering
Yeah.
the love. Yeah.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And that grief journey, it is a journey. And so it's not meant to be cut off or ended, or I'm supposed to be here by now. And so I think if I'm taking away anything, it's like that journey is a journey. It's not a destination.
Correct. Yeah. And it's not going to end. It's going to change. I'm going to change. And that's one of the reasons why, when I got asked to do those books, I was really, thankful for that, because
Mhm.
it was sharing my story, but really putting my thoughts out and how I felt at the time. But I'm going to feel differently
Yeah.
later. And so I of course read both books because it's got multiple authors in it, but I haven't gone back and done it in a while. I'm not planning on doing it yet, but at some point I am, and I'm going to read my story, and I'm going to be able to see how I've changed and
Yeah.
see that I'm in a different spot in my journey now.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Well, I am so grateful for this conversation. It was very filling for me to be able to have this dialogue with you, and it's beautiful to be able to share
Yeah.
in the journey.
Right.
And I appreciate you for, like I said earlier, the work that you're doing, the conversations that you're cultivating as Dr. Serendipity.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. Again, thanks for allowing me to share. I mean, it is helpful for me to share in this kind of way. I appreciate it.
yeah, yes. Well, tell the people where they follow you.
Mhm. So you can follow me. So Dr. Serendipity, Instagram,
Mhm.
TikTok. I do have a YouTube, but I barely ever put anything on there. So mainly just Instagram and TikTok. And I always tell people, especially like March of 22, that's when I really was putting out a lot of videos. And I
Mhm.
talked a lot about my journey and the process through that.
Mhm.
So look back through some of those videos back then. But then again, I'm a family doctor. I'm on there talking about hypertension, diabetes, like
Yes,
what
indeed.
breast cancer Halloween
That's
shirt today.
right. That's right.
So probably be putting some videos about breast cancer screening here soon too. So
Very cool. Very cool. And where can they find these books?
yeah, and then the books too. So the Fatherless Curiosity, the blue one there, that one you can go directly to Amazon. Now I'm going to throw this out there. So for the book, The Fatherless Curiosity, you can get that off of Amazon, but there's multiple authors. So please find the one that's got my name on it and not somebody else's name. And then the Men Just Remarried book, that one you can get directly from my website, which is drserendipity.md.com. But if you make it just to like my Instagram page, that's got links to everything there. And so, and I can also mail out both books personally, or the Fatherless Curiosity one can be done from Amazon.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. So we will make sure we have those links on our show notes. Yeah, so pick up a book. They're good books. I've had the opportunity, as I said, to read the story in this one. I can't wait to get to A Fatherless Curiosity. So again, thank you
Yeah,
for all that you're doing. And for those who are listening, thank you, because without you, there's no podcast. And so I encourage you to share this episode, because this grief journey, it can be challenging, and we need to be hearing these stories and normalizing this process that we go through.
yeah,
So share it with a friend, share it with a colleague, share it with a family member, and leave a comment to let the people coming after you know how good this conversation was. Okay.
appreciate it.
Oh, I very much appreciate you. Very much appreciate you. So for those of y'all who are listening, have a great rest of the day and a great rest of the week. And until I see you again, stay empowered.
Bye, everybody.